We are here today with Nathalie, director with Name Architecture. Welcome, Nathalie, to the
Thank
podcast. What is that few things or one thing that you know is very certain to change and will change in a big way?
Thanks for bringing that question up, because I think AI is definitely the big thing that is going to change or is changing our profession already.
In what way?
Early days, everyone was thinking very. The first reaction was to say it's going to take our jobs away. It's going to do what we do, and that's not. I don't think that's not the case. However, we have to learn how to work with these tools, use them, and we're in a situation now where it's a communication between us and the AI. It's a dialogue, a discussion that is more and more present in our work and will evolve as such.
So you are one side you're being creative and then you're managing the business as well. Is there a particular way for sure challenging? Is there a particular way of you dealing with the whole stress situations? Or you just still smiling?
I smile. It goes by.
We are here today with Nathalie, director with Name Architecture. Welcome, Nathalie, to the
Thank
podcast.
you. Thanks for having
GBB
me.
Unplugged.
Thank you.
Here at the finish of the 16th edition of Red Summit.
Amazing 2 days.
So I'm podcasting a podcaster for the first time. I would like to begin by understanding about name. How did it come by?
Right.
I see a lot of experience in your profile, but I'm very curious to know how the name come by.
So, thanks first of all for hosting us and having us here over these 2 days. It was really, really great event and great opportunities. So name, how I had a previous architectural office called Rare at the time.
Yes, I saw that. You're a co-founder there.
Exactly. And after a number of very creative and good years, we decided to split, seeing ways our future differently, and then that's when I set up Name. But a bit over 6 years ago. But obviously, it's a continuation of a very long experience and contacts and presence in the industry. So that's how it started. People then often ask me why Name.
That's right. It's an interesting name.
Exactly for it. As an office, we're based in Paris and London. So first of all, we needed a name that can work in both languages and is easy and catchy enough to work in both worlds. My surname was out of the question. But anyway, I also think there's something which I like about the fact that of having a more general name for a studio, because it's actually an effort of co-creation with a whole team, and I think there's a way that the team can appropriate and feel part of a team when it's not necessarily a person's name, but something that they can appropriate. So after a long search of what name I should choose, one day my sister just said, "Why don't you call it Name? Stop asking," and that's how it came about. But I like to say as well, there's a nice symbol behind it, because naming something is creating it. In a spiritual way, or in biblical tradition, when God names things, that's when they're created. So I think there's a nice connotation there of giving a name to something is the start of a creation.
That's a lovely name you got.
Thank you.
So your experience in Middle East, it's been 6 years, and rightly so, you've had about 12 years prior to that experience.
Yes.
It's a continued experience. You've been in the Middle East before that as well, or?
No, actually, the main experience in the Middle East started with Name.
Nice.
About almost over 5 years ago. Invited to a competition here where international 5 international offices had been selected.
Lovely.
And that was our first meeting and entering with the kingdom. And it was fascinating, a great project to work on as well, and then since then things have evolved a lot for the studio in this country.
And these competitions, for me, I mean, even though I interact and deal with architects and designers all the time, it only occurred to me after a certain point about these competitions. It is the way of uh, companies getting selected, projects happening.
Not the only way. There are many ways, but it's one of the way.
The
Usually,
most interesting way, I must say.
it is interesting. It's interesting, and also usually the briefs and the projects are quite interesting and prestigious, and um, definitely have are also usually when you're selected, it's a fit with what your company does and can contribute to this. So it's one very interesting way of actually entering the market.
Some of the biggest projects of it, I was with Asir this morning, and a lot of the selections they make is through competition.
Competitions, yes. They very often have shortlists of companies and then ask them to participate in at least in a pre-concept to give some initial thoughts and then select upon this. And this is also very well established here in Saudi in terms of ways of working on the larger PIF projects as well.
Right. I'm very curious to understand and also learn about your design philosophy.
So, um, we're very concept driven as a company. So I always think that having a strong concept at the outset is what enables us also to keep a project alive and almost like having a backbone on which to rely on for the length of the project, because it's a long process of developing and designing a project with many changes along the way. And it's when there is actually this strong concept to hold by, it's for us as designers a guarantee that we have always a reference point to come back to and to judge by. But this is very much part of our internal process of working. We also like to work very much in very strong context based areas or sites where we always look for something, take something from the context itself, from the site itself, which is a starting point for an inspiration, and reinterpret that as part of our story, as part of the concept of what we're proposing. So that can be a particular ornamental element that was there, or a particular material that we found, or history, a story, a narrative that goes around that, and that becomes something that kind of triggers our initial thoughts, and then is
And
an element.
what's the most that inspires you in this whole process?
It's it can be, I mean, we've worked a lot with a historic building. So in a historic building, it's very much usually something that catches our attention, a particular material or a particular way of, I'll give us an example. Our project in London, the Town Hall Hotel, which is an old town hall that we converted into a hotel.
Okay.
It was a Grade 2 listed building, so a heritage asset that had to be very carefully worked with. And we also proposed quite a new and contemporary extension to that. But what triggered us very much in that building was a ventilation grill from the 1930s, part of the Art Deco style of some of the rooms, and that became the kind of element that from which a long story of ideas evolved in the project. So we reinterpreted that pattern to become the pattern of openings on the new facade that we created. A lot of the ventilation grills that were installed in the building, a lot of the materials, lining of walls and furniture, were all taken from that initial inspiration and all the work we did on reinterpreting these patterns. So that's one example of an element in the site. When we worked in projects in Alula, it was very much looking at actually the traditional techniques of them making bricks and the materiality of this, and this was a strong inspiration to then create a geometry that could work with that as an element, and the way they were stacked to create interesting forms. So something like this that triggers our interest, and then we develop a story and a research around that.
And how did architecture itself happen for you?
Oh, interesting. It was I would not. It wasn't necessarily a dream as many people have in their youth to say I'll become an architect. It was just a bit of a reasoned approach when I had to decide what I wanted to study. To say where which I like doing creative things, but I also like to solve problems, and I started architecture as being the mother of the arts, and something that could then lead to other elements, and I fell in love with it. I became really passionate about it. So had the chance to study in a great school as well in London at the AA. And it was really great to see how many different elements or topics that you could be inspired by and take to make a design process from, whether it's sociology, geography, materials, elements of a history and historical element that you reinterpret. Everything can be the departure point and the thought process that you bring into architecture, and that was really fascinating.
Is the process that excites you, the design process that excites you the most, or is it when you see everything coming alive? Which is more intense for you?
Of course, seeing the project coming live is a pleasure, but it usually comes after long, painful, sometimes painful journey of for a long construction period and a lot of discussions around that. So it's of course a pleasure, but I have to say that the design process itself is really intellectually always very pleasurable for us to work and to develop.
And do you also get inspired by other designers? Who inspires you?
Yes, I do. It's I still think one of the architects that I admired the most are Herzog and de Meuron in Switzerland, because I think that their thought process and the way they approach every project really with this certain element of research as well that goes into a particular materiality, inventing a new way of using the material, or just working with an actual site. There you can really see in every one of their projects that that's a unique thought process that has gone through this, and there's something common in all the work, because it has this common theme that you read through them, but it's not stylistically necessarily the same.
In what lens do you see architecture? You told you fell in love with it, but at the moment, in what lens do you see your job?
So I think we have a huge responsibility, especially today with all the urban sprawl. How we think about what we're doing today and how it affects the future. We work a lot in very historic cities originally. I mean, in working in Europe, in Paris and London.
Is that your strength? Like, do you mainly focus on these historical buildings?
Not only but it's a strong, at least a strong element of the way that we grew and set up, and this I think brings us a lot of a certain signature in working with sites that have something particular to preserve or to take out, or to invent a story from, and to create something from that story. But I think you really learn how to insert something in something that's already existing when you work in those kind of cities, because they're also very strong in terms of regulations and what you're allowed or not allowed to do.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have to
Does
really
it bring in sort of limitations to your creative process?
Yes, but actually I think those limitations are the creativity goes into with those limitations. I think that these constraints make you work creatively, try to think outside of the box that you're given, and how do you reinterpret those creatively. And it's interesting to see, because if you say take a city like Paris, for example, everyone abides by the same regulation, but you have a multitude of responses and answers to that, and that I think is really interesting to see and to explore. So I think that's really something that we thrive working with, and to as you say, to establish what are the constraints that limit a certain process, but are also the departure point for working creatively within them. Because whether you have regulations or not, there's always limitations to
That's right.
constraints to a project.
That's right.
They can be budgetary, site-wise, time, many different types of constraints that you have to work within. So it's how you deal with them creatively.
What's the goal of name architecture? Like in 5 years or 10 years, do you have a certain a way of looking at it? Okay, this is where I want to be, or it can be anything. Where you, what's in it for 5 years, 10 years?
I think we definitely like to see some of the projects we're working on here emerge and come to life and experience them. We also look very much forward to diversify in the region in terms of both the areas that we're working with and the types of projects. We do a lot of hospitality work here for the moment, and which is great. We love working on hotels, but
is that your biggest portfolio?
Hospitality and residential is
Nice.
the biggest. I'd love to also have a more cultural focused project. So as a next step, maybe of type of project that we tackle in the office, because very interesting to also think what the project like that brings back, gives back to the society, and how you can really change the nature of an area by injecting these type of venues and activities.
As an architect, have you ever imagined if you were given, let's say, the whole world with you, have you thought it should be of a certain design? Is that thought ever occur?
No, not like that. I really think I need constraints to create. So I think
Okay.
I actually, that's why one of the reasons why we like working with existing buildings or sites that have strong constraints, because that really drives a certain creativity in me and in the studio, where we actually say, okay, this is what we're given. How do we now improve it? How do we make it enjoyable for the users? How do we make it functional, useful for the client, etc.? So
who's your main partner when you want to bring your design to life? Is it the material suppliers, the owner? I mean, I think all of them are some way playing a partner role in making that come alive. But who do you think is the most important?
Well, I would say the client, because very often the quality of the outcome is also very dependent on the relationship that you have with the client and the clients themselves, because it's I think that is the main element that creates the success of a project. So I'd say that first of all. After that, we're I think I would say it depends from the nature of the project. If we're doing something that is engineering wise very tricky and very ambitious, then it would be the engineers. When we work on heritage buildings, I have to say actually that the main constraint, or the main the hardest part to get right, is the MEP. Because how do you upgrade an old existing building?
That's right.
To today's standard without affecting its proportions, its ornaments, or whatever that it's made of, but inserting all these.
But you solve it, of course.
Yes, but you have to. That's the kind of the relationship you have with those consultants that are very important. So. It really could depend from the nature of the project, but we're very inspired by materiality, but mostly as well lately by techniques of production or construction. So thinking a lot of how 3D printing starts to take place in the industry, not at the various scales. So whether it's the scale of an object, the furniture, a house, a building, but also recently we developed a concept to think about how a whole urban master plan could be developed with a 3D printing as a mode of construction, and how, as always, traditionally cities have evolved in a particular form because also of the way that material productions could be brought to the site and built. So how do we think of the future city when 3D printing is the main construction method? So we're very interested in those topics. Recently, robotic arms. When I spoke about the project in Alula earlier, it was a combination of a traditional craftsmanship making bricks, but then having them laid with a robotic arm to create much more complex forms. So we're very interested in this kind of a combination of techniques and materiality. We like to coin it a certain form of digital craftsmanship because it has qualities of what traditional craftsmanship has, but in working with the digital tools that enable you to do that today.
And as an architect, and you also have your podcasts and on design and architecture and all of it, what is that few things or one thing that you know is very certain to change, and it will change in a big way?
So thanks for bringing that question up, because I think AI is definitely the big thing that is going to change or is changing our profession already.
In what ways? Yeah.
So that's the interesting question. Thanks for bringing our podcast up, because that's the purpose of the podcast was to actually question how does this paradigm shift affect our profession, and what changes it will bring. So of course, at the early days, everyone was thinking very the first reaction was to say it's going to take our jobs away. It's going to do what we do. And that's not, I don't think that's not the case. However, we have to learn how to work with these tools, use them. And we're in a situation now where it's a communication between us and the AI. It's a dialogue, a discussion that is more and more present in our work and will evolve as such. So I think it's very interesting to observe all of these changes as they're happening. Of course, everyone's familiar with the image generative AI for image creating videos today, but there's so much more elements to it as well. With a real question about, in a sense, the democratization of these tools, meaning that everyone, whether you're an architect or not, or a designer or not, can use them. So you get in situations, for example, where the client shows you an image he produced on Midjourney and says, "This is what I want my project to look like." How do you approach these kind of situations? There's also tools developing where you prompt and it creates 3D models
absolutely
directly. So the ease for people to already have a 3-dimensional model created very quickly from some ideas. It asks a lot of questions of where do we fit in that process, and how do we readapt our knowledge, our skills, and what do we bring to projects. For me, there's one very important question in all that is how do we educate architects in the future with these tools? I'm quite surprised, because I lecture a lot in schools about this, or participate in kind of introductory talks to that, and I'm still quite surprised to see that it's not so widely adopted by students as I would have imagined. But I think the education of an architect is a 5-year process. It's traditionally was a process by which you every year you tackled a project or several projects at increasingly complex scales, and there's a whole process of learning that traditionally, at least over the last century, was thought of to be as the education of an architect. And it's a question now with these generative tools that enable you to very quickly have a lot of results and a lot of options and a lot of visuals. How do you set yourself into this in terms of learning how to judge, make decisions, understand what criteria are important spatially, urbanistically, and so on? So that's a real. I don't have an answer necessarily, but I think those are questions that trigger us a lot, and
this is what you would want the future generation of architects to pick it up from now itself.
I think that you have to be conscious today, if you embark on those studies, that this is part of your future a part of your profession in the future. It's how do you use this creatively? Is it a tool that you of course it's a creative tool, but you can use it as also in a critical way, meaning that the critical process of using it generates something interesting. It's of course very useful for really increasing the amount of work and project that we can tackle at a certain time, because there's a lot of help that comes out of these tools, and especially in terms of abiding to regulations and all this kind of knowledge that you can very quickly get to and have an interaction with to resolve. There's also a lot of things that we can now do at early stages in a project in-house and without necessarily needing consultants, because we use these tools that
Right.
can do that. So there is a real paradigm shift and a questioning of how we evolve with it as a profession in the future, and I think also to some extent it will probably blur the limits of some professions that will have much more overlays in terms of the skills of a particular trade and another one, and which could be more blended or confused in a sense. So yes, and at the end of the day, I still think that the connection that you have with a client, as we see here, actually, which is great at such events, because you realize how important it is to meet, to talk, to laugh over dinner, and then have coffee together. That is something that is invaluable and that needs to that will always exist, I think. So it's really how to learn to use the tools and to your benefit, so that
What made you? What pushed you for a podcast?
Interesting question. So, I have a great sister with whom we have very interesting talks. So, after she's not not in the design. She was educated as in photography and video, but she's a data strategist today.
Nice.
And we had a lot of Saturday afternoon coffee talks about these topics and how it's changing the industry, what it means in terms of copyrights, what it means in terms of course, there's a whole topic of AI and biases, and what the AI is taught, and on what basis it then generates something. How do you judge that? How do you interact that? A lot of topics that I can talk for hours. So I invite you to listen to the podcast.
Yeah,
so these
podcast.
generated so interesting coffee talks, and at some point we said, "What? Maybe we should just invite people to contribute and discuss these with us and make it into a podcast rather than just talking over coffee." And so that's how it started. And it was actually great and very, very pleasant to do, because it's also very interesting to research every time the topic, the guest. We prepare the questions.
What's the most interesting thing that you found? I mean, amongst the many things that you must have found.
I'd say really every episode is interesting, but it was very interesting to talk about copyright and then the history of copyrights and how this now affects the future definition of it. Very interesting as well to talk about recently our last episode talked about how the AI forgets, so how you can unlearn. Okay. Which is it's great, because it's a field in which every day there's something new, and what you were afraid of yesterday is actually now has a solution to, but creates a new. So and we had a very, very interesting episode, which very related, I'd say, to architecture in the field, about how are there comparative things in the history of architecture. I mean, architecture as a profession is relatively young, but in the history of building, is there such a paradigm shift as strong as AI that changed the profession? And can you compare it to is the invention of the printing press, for example, something that revolutionized the architectural making, or to such an extent, or not? So that's a very interesting episode about comparing previous big shifts in the creative fields to AI.
Working in Saudi and working elsewhere, is there any distinctive difference?
Yes, of course. I think there's a lot of energy here, definitely, and you can feel it everyone's contributing, everyone's very optimistic about the future and what it holds, which is not always the case, and not, or at least not so much the case anymore in Europe. And also, I think the ease in which things can actually happen here. We're working on a project in the Asir region, and it's great to see the relationship that you can have with the authorities where it's quite quick to get a response and answer and an indication on how we can shift things or what decisions can be taken. Whereas that in Europe, something like that would take months, if not years, to change. So there's a real dynamism and energy, and a real excitement by everyone to feel that they're building their future and contributing to something, to this change. So I think that's really amazing and exciting to see. And in a sense, I always say, I think it was also very, in a way, an interesting move to invite a lot of architects to come and work here and contribute to this, because we become ambassadors then of also what is going on here, and telling people you'll be coming to Saudi on holiday to Saudi in a few years' time, because it's amazing what's happening and what's going on here. So that's really great to be here for that, and also I think the opportunity to work on exceptional projects.
And material wise, because we always are also scouting to find best materials to be at our event and things like that. Honestly, we find the most sustainable, technologically advanced ones still from Europe.
Yes, because I think it's first of all, it's a real topic. I mean, I would say the industry in this side is mature enough to be able to tackle that topic, because maybe a lot of the other things are already established, but it's also a real concern, I think, in terms of the impact that this has on our environment. There's a limited number of resources as well, and how do we work with them? So, and also it's very strongly regulated and enforced in Europe today. So, every building, whether it's even a family house that you're designing, has to have a certain rating of sustainability, control of use of materials and techniques that you're using. So it's a given almost, and it's really it's a value that the clients are looking for as part of their decision-making process. So that it's great to know that we're still leading in something, and in that.
That even though technically we do not understand the things that you might look at from a material point of view, but these are just based on conversations and some of the key points. We've got some amazing European solutions here.
Yes.
And the simple way they explain and things like that just fascinates us on the boundaries they keep pushing on the sustainability part, which and we try to bring in a lot of such solutions here and introduce them to the
market. And I think it's important, because we have the opportunity here, because it's a market that is being built up, to have that already as a given when you start, which is it's always easier to start than to change something. So
that's right.
That's so we've seen some very interesting materials, recycled techniques presented as well, and it's great to see. Also, a lot of thinking for us goes into all sorts of local sourced materials, or materials from excavations here, and how they can be reintegrated in the building process to create a certain material or certain particular pieces of furniture, or how there's this whole life cycle goes about. But I also like to say a lot that sustainability is also a lot about thinking how can you adapt what you're doing, how something that you're designing today will be adapted in the future. And that's, I think, also very interesting to think about, whether it's at the scale of the material. Is it something that can be recycled later on, or when you're designing a particular building? Is it something that can be the structure? Can it still remain to be used for something else if it needs to? So that's also part of the approach.
Do you work in markets like Africa or India?
No,
Southeast Asia?
not yet. I would say Southeast Asia. Yes, we have worked. We've worked in Thailand and Vietnam. But
growing markets.
Yes.
And in Asia also.
Yes, but Africa and not yet. No.
Okay. Well, Saudi Vision 2030. How does that resonate with you?
I think it's the basis of everything that's happening here, or at least that started it. And I think when I was talking about a concept and a vision earlier on, this is the role that it plays. It's really a very, very strong vision that was initiated, and that is the driver for everything that carries on through that. So I think it's great to see how it's kept alive. It evolves, and but how it's really the goal that everyone is working towards to meet and to reach. So
and do you go to colleges and lecture? Is that something you?
Yes, I did. I taught for 12 years while setting up the practice as well.
I did not see that, or maybe I missed seeing that on the LinkedIn profile.
Maybe it's not clear enough, so I have to. I taught for 12 years at the AA London as well. Great, it's great. I loved that period, and teaching is great.
No, honestly, I just thought so. I thought maybe you already teach, and that's how I asked the question. I was talking to Francesca as well.
Yes.
She's been a lecturer as well. You know Francesca?
Yes, we met here. Actually, it was lovely to meet.
So I just thought perhaps because you got a podcast, you're very enthusiastic about what's future with architecture. So I just assumed so.
No, thanks. It was a great period. I think 12 years was a very good cycle as well to complete. I definitely want to go back to teaching. There's some when my second child was born, it was I continued working, but something had to diminish so that I'd have time as well for the family. So after a 12-year cycle, I thought I'd take a pause, but I still enjoy the connection, the relationship with the school a lot, and whether through the podcast actually, which is a way of continuing these thoughts processes, but also actually still giving talks a lot in educational environments to discuss these topics that we're passionate about.
So I met you yesterday at that OSIS gathering we had. One thing I noticed about you is you're smiling all the time. How do you manage? So in this creative process, I believe that there is stress for sure, but for most part of it, I also noticed you in the dinner area as well. For most part, you're smiling. Is that something you practice, or is it something natural?
No, I think it's quite natural. Yes, I enjoy what I'm doing, so I think hopefully it comes through. I also think a lot of it is about enjoying the relationships you have with people, the connections you create, and it's always nicer to see someone smiling to you than not.
That's true.
But
how do you manage stress? You mentioned one thing that you very good with you're very passionate about the creative process, but also the problem solving side of it. I assume that helps you with business because you're also running the business.
Yes, yeah.
So you are one side you're being creative, and then you're managing the business as well. Is there a particular way for sure challenging? Is there a particular way of you dealing with the whole stress situations? Or you just still smile?
I smile. It goes by. No, of course I work a lot, or when I in stressful. I mean, it's getting the things done that then brings you keeps the stress lowered. But I have to say I have a lovely team of people working around me that support me a lot, whether the team in the office, a great studio manager and a great set of architects that work. We've been working together for a long time, and we all know how to complement each other, and I can rely on them to also to take off some of that stress. And being a sole director or business owner, I also have a good set of consultants that I work with that provide input on financial projections, on fee proposals, on all this kind of ecosystem that you have to build around the business to keep it afloat. So that was one of the things I learned from after my first business venture to the second one.
Yeah,
to have
it's very similar in my case. I had also co-founded another company, and then after 6 years, GBB happened. So GBB is also 6 years old now.
nice.
So we are very
We're
similar. So I understand what you're
Same
saying,
thing.
and it's true. When you have a team that is great, you enjoy what you do.
Yes, and you can, when you know you can rely on them, it's great. And then and then I think, like everyone, sometimes you just need to stop for a day or two, do something else, realize again what's important in life, and
Right.
and go back to it with fresh eyes. And I have also I have a great family support as well,
Okay.
that are always there and supportive
Well,
of that.
fantastic. So I wish the very best for
Thank you.
Flame Architecture and to
Thank
you
you.
and your journey ahead. I wish for us to again sit perhaps a few years later
It's
and try to understand where to where and what all happened.
great. I hope it'll be me and not my AI sitting here and talking to you.
I hope not.
But no, with pleasure. I think, and thanks again. It's been a really great set of days, and an amazing
Thank you.
event.
Thank you for
Thanks
your time. It's been amazing having you here. And
Thank you.
me knowing you since yesterday evening has been fun. So that's one thing I noticed, that you're always smiling. I don't think one can practice it to happen. I think it's very natural. And
Thanks.
and thank you for being here. And I wish you the very best in Saudi Arabia as well.
Thank
And
you.
for all your endeavors. And for me, this conversation was very interesting. The things I learned about you and your thinking process and the work and all of it. And I hope even listeners and the people who are watching the video also will find some interesting and useful things out of this conversation.
Great. Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. It maybe just add, if people do want to follow the podcast, it's called Designing Futures.
Designing
Futures,
Alright.
AI, data, and beyond. And it's on all available podcasts. And thank you very much for hosting us for the podcast. It was very interesting to talk, and it's always interesting to question the story of how everything happened. So thanks.
You're welcome,
you.
and pleasure is mine. Thank you.
See you soon.